G'day, listeners. Today we're joined by Drew Wolfendale. He's the president of the Fusion Party for 2 years running.
I thought that was you.
Oh, not quite.
Okay.
Maybe one day. That's not my plans at the moment. Anyway, but Drew is also involved in the Science Party. He's run as a candidate in Australia. Drew, looking forward to our chat.
Thanks for having me.
G'day, listeners. Welcome to My First Party, the podcast where we meet people at the grassroots of politics, especially in Australia. My name's Owen Miller. I'm a candidate for the Fusion Party. With me, as usual, Brunswick's favourite bullshit detector.
Do I call it?
Are you not the bullshit detector anymore?
No, not today.
Mr. Peter Cargiotis.
Hello.
So Drew, good to have you. This is our second time around. Sorry, listeners, if it's obvious, but anyway. So Drew, you were saying to us before, you had a life before you were president of the Fusion Party. Would viewers believe? I mean, it looks as though you were made for the role. But can you tell us, by the way, what happened? So you were in the Science Party before.
Yep.
How long ago did that form, and how long were you in it?
So the Science Party was formed in, I want to say 2009. I joined it about a year and a half into Tony Abbott's term.
You remember that because he was very scientific? Is that the reason?
Well, no, he was his anti-science approach was what drove me to originally organize some friends into a group and then realize that forming a party was way hard and look for one myself. And then I found the Science
There was
Party.
a lot of flat Earth discussion around then.
Oh,
it started kicking off a lot globally. Yeah.
He's actually for our foreign listeners, you might not be aware. So Tony Abbott, previous Prime Minister of Australia, he was also Health Minister before. He briefly went to priest school. He was briefly a boxer. It wasn't professionally, but it was pretty serious. He's lived an interesting life. There's actually rumors he might be coming back. What do you reckon of that, Drew?
Hey, look. Of the many prime ministers that I have issues with, I respect that at least Tony Abbott has a strong personal investment in his community. But the last thing I think we need is him to come back to politics.
I'll remember, who was it for one of the, we'll play the game a bit later, I'm guessing the quote, but yeah, we did previously on the show, the quote was, what the housewives of Australia need to remember when they're doing the ironing is that electricity prices are going up. This was from Mr. Abbott, yeah. Do you remember this one?
I can't remember that one.
I could have done it again today. Would you have got it, Drew?
I don't think I remember that one. I think I may have blotted some of that period out of my mind.
Fair enough. But actually, why don't we play now? Yeah. Anyone, viewers, the idea, guess the quote. Who said this? So I'll give you a hint. It's a philosopher from quite a long time ago. Maybe you'll get it. It might be tricky. But the quote is, laws are like spiders' webs. If some poor, weak creature comes up against them, it is caught. But a big one can break through and get away.
Is that a philosophy?
Well, I would put them more in the bucket of philosopher as opposed to, actually, they were a political leader as well.
Oh, well.
But I guess, since they're so long ago, we think of them more as a philosopher.
Long ago.
Quite a while ago, yeah. Drew, any...
Can you give us a region?
Ancient Greece.
Okay.
It doesn't sound like one of the big ones. I feel like I would throw out Aristotle or Plato, but it's got to be someone else.
Indeed, a bit before them, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, was it... Well,
anyway, for the viewers...
It was a Leonidas or something.
Could be around that time. But so it was Solon, the lawgiver. Something, a bit of trivia, which, people might not know about. So Solon, for instance, he came straight after Dracon. So Dracon had very harsh punishments. So you could be put to death if you were guilty of murder, if you were guilty of theft. You'd be murdered, and that's
like Moses and stuff that we
pretty similar, yeah. But I guess when people say that's so draconian, this is referencing Dracon, yeah. So
there you go.
But yeah, so this guy, he had it reminds me a lot of Babylon. So people would get seriously in debt if they have a farm and they want to grow crops. They need to hire workers to plant the seeds, to sow everything. But then if it turns out the harvest isn't any good, these people still worked for you. They still want to be paid. And so it would be typical to get so deep into debt that you would have to give your children away to slavery. You would have to your wife, and then lastly, the father of the house would be the last person to become a slave. So yeah, Solon made a great amount of progress here. He banned the idea of people as collateral for loans, so you could no longer get into debt servitude. He had a debt jubilee, forgave all the current debts and freed those slaves who had, become slaves because of the debts. Redistributed land. I figured
Stuff
Drew,
like socialism.
oh yeah, I figured Drew might like this guy.
If I recall correctly, he's also the first one that introduced a council of elected or somewhat elected people to actually weigh some
there
sort
was
of balance against the leader.
That's right. Yeah. So there was, they did have like multiple leaders before, but I remember actually one of the things Solon did, he made it so more people were eligible to vote. And that, basically like poor people couldn't vote before. No, I think you had to be, you had to be part of the aristocracy before, I think, to have a vote. And he introduced it for everyone. And actually they were saying, there's this concept of isonomy, which some people are saying is more important than democracy. Isonomy is the idea that everybody's governed by the same rules. And I guess, we see in this quote about the spider's web, this is important to him. Would you create laws that you yourself had to abide by? There was no idea of... I find in the US, for instance, isn't it outrageous? It's a regular occurrence. They get the pardons. In Indonesia as well, the president pardons people willy-nilly. How outrageous, yeah. It's... Do you know, by the way, Drew, is it possible in Australia for the Prime Minister or anyone to issue pardons?
No.
I mean, I don't hear about it.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
No,
Yeah.
our Prime Minister doesn't have that sort of power. The advantage of a parliamentary system, I suppose.
Oh boy.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah,
You
these
pardon-
days we call isonomy rule of law.
Well, who can prove that they're right? That's a court of law. You don't have to necessarily be right. You just have to prove that you're right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess so. But I guess once in a while a pardon would be handy. Remember Julian Assange? I guess a lot of, if all the case is going to boil down to like, did he commit the crime? Did he not? I think for many people it was more important, like maybe he did, commit some sort of crime, but it was for a noble cause. So basically he should be allowed to do it. And, I think if you're allowed to say like the cause was so noble that it doesn't matter the technicalities of if he actually committed the crime or not.
Well, you just have to look at our defamation laws in Australia.
Oh, well,
They're very tight, but the only people seem to get jailed are those other whistleblowers and so forth, right, in Australia. So, yeah.
Well, actually, you see a big problem with the defamation laws actually in Australia. It's since it's so easy to sue for defamation here compared to other places, it essentially curtails freedom of speech because, sure, you can say like this was truthful, so it's fine, but you still get put through this enormous lawsuit. Yeah. There was a case actually, Drew, did you hear about this one? Rebel Wilson, the actor. So she had been lying for years that she was younger than she actually was. It was like 5 years or so. She was saying she was 5 years younger.
I vaguely recall this, yep.
And so she got busted, I don't know, 10 years ago. But so it was Woman's Day where it was published. Their parent company got sued. And Rebel Wilson herself she studied law at UNSW. So she was, I don't know if she was actually part of the case or if she just left that to her, team. But this was the biggest defamation case in Australian history, and she won, even though she was indeed lying about her age. But the ruling was along the lines of like, who really cares? Like, this is just a bit of gossip, and now you're ruining her career over this. How dare you?
Was it really just over about her age?
Yeah, well, no, like she could show. She lost.
Yeah, but the whole issue I'm saying was about her age.
Yeah.
That's what they went to court over.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like this is outrageous. These people would have been thinking like, sure, maybe they shouldn't have published it. It was like a bit of gossip, whatever. But they probably would have been thinking, but it's true, so we're fine.
Yes,
so
unfortunately, the way our defamation laws are structured, it's about
who has the money.
Well, it's about the damage that you can do to someone with words, not whether or not those words, not whether that is appropriate or correct. So if you've done a bunch of damage to someone with words, then
No,
that's what the
but
laws
the
are about.
difference, yeah, but the difference that how our laws are in Australia is that, which is different to other countries, is that even if you say something that's true about me and I've got money, I then will threaten you of taking you to court and basically make sure that you back out of that because I'll take you to court. You'll lose everything because I've got more money.
Yeah.
That's the way the laws are set up in this country.
It's worry, yeah. Well, actually, Drew, that reminds me. I saw in your blog. Yeah, actually, it was for people who don't know. Sorry. Yeah, for people who don't know. Yeah, Drew also has a personal site where he publishes thoughts. It was funny. I was catching up on this, before today. I was making sure I was prepared. The guy on the train says, like, "You look really depressed. That must be pretty shit what you're reading." I was reading Drew's site, but I told him it was economics, but then he went off this rant about how the economy isn't working for people, and they're screwing us, and like, oh well, I wasn't quite in the mood to give him the fusion sticker and everything, but yeah, sorry. To the point, Drew, you were writing about like inclusive economic institutions, exclusive. Can you tell viewers a bit more about like how would you define these things?
So, inclusive and exclusive institutions is sort of a few steps down the path from what most people have some understanding of. But the basic premise is whether or not the system of laws or functions in a given context protects people's ability to engage with the system or allows some subset of people to exploit a position to extract additional wealth or influence from it. So, for example, universal suffrage, every single person has the right to vote. That is an inclusive institution. It's an inclusive political institution specifically. That's very key because then every person has the ability to represent the issues that matter to them into the national debate. When you have a reduced number of people who can vote, for example, then the politics will reflect their concerns. And we don't need to go into details about how well oligarchies have fared in the last century or so.
I brought it up specifically because when we're saying about defamation, how like we think of these courts as benefiting everyone, but if it ends up being so expensive to go to court, so difficult, then like is it fit for purpose anymore?
Well, yeah. So I'm still interested to hear what you mean by these inclusive and exclusive, because without you obviously having a chance to fully explain it because you interrupted. It sounds like you're just putting descriptions to what we actually have on some institutions. And back to Owen's point, though, just because we all get a chance to vote, and we've seen how the LNP and Labor have colluded together to start making it difficult for independents to get into the electoral system. So sure, we've got quote unquote a democratic system. To what end?
Yeah, so our defamation laws are an example of an extractive or exclusive political institution because that allows people with money to essentially defend their position and their views from people without money within society. And particularly when you talk about media organizations or big personalities like Reaper and all that sort of stuff, then they do allow people with entrenched power and influence to defend that position even against the truth. So that is an exclusive or extractive institution.
So you'd call even then our tax system in some ways has some components of inclusiveness, but also aspects of exclusiveness. So even what you kind of extrapolated to the housing crisis is that, the tax system is set up to facilitate the current system and force people to live in the outer regions of, let's say, Melbourne, Sydney, etc., putting tolls on their roads to perpetuate it. And yet, what the media would say is that, we've got welfare cheats, and through the tax system, and that's eating up a large portion of the budget. But, I'd say the biggest, the way the economy is set up, the tax system actually benefits those, whether it's the mining companies, resource development rebates that they get, or the housing crisis, as I just said there. So
yeah, Absolutely. And it's important to note that like no country is all one or all the other. Like even just looking at our tax system, there would be half a dozen institutions just in the tax system based on different ways that tax is operated in Australia. And each of those would be in a different part of the inclusive to exclusive discussion. So altogether, it might be marginally one way or the other, but it's all these individual components that all accrue and interact in different ways. Um, when you
Yeah,
have,
actually,
yeah,
Drew, I was reading this thing. So listeners might know Richard Dennis from the Australia Institute. It's like a left-wing think tank. But I saw, so he's pushing this line, fixing a housing crisis is not complicated. But instead of our state and federal governments building more housing, they now build a lot less than they used to. His solution is just build more houses. But Drew, you would have loved this lady today. She was walking past on the phone, and yeah, she was saying like, all these places are sitting empty, and they get these tax breaks. We don't need to build more fucking houses. I thought like, oh wow, this lady like, she would love fusion, but she was on the phone. I couldn't interrupt her. But
that's very much my hobby horse. There are so many unoccupied houses in this country, and so many unoccupied social houses because
oh really?
of a huge like maintenance problem. So there's lots of well, I say lots. There's less than ever before, but there's quite a decent chunk of public and social housing that someone will move out of for whatever reason, and then it needs maintenance, and so they send someone to do maintenance. They fix things up, and then because the system is so burdened by the number of applicants and the lack of people working at it, that it takes like 2 months to process someone's case and work out where they're going to put them. And by that point, someone's broken in, squatted in the house, done damage to it, and it needs to be maintained again. And so then it can't be assigned. So then they have to get maintenance back in and do more things. And all of these maintenance companies, like there used to be state government maintenance, right? There were tradies employed by the state government who did all of this public housing maintenance directly. And none of that exists anymore. So it's all contracted. And because they're all short for funds, they're always paying the lowest possible rates. So they're never any trades priority work because no one wants to do the cheapest work first. So they're always pushed down the line, pushed down the line, pushed down the line. And then they fix things up. And then it takes 2 months to put someone in the house. And in the meantime, someone breaks in or squats or whatever, and then they have to do all over again. So many properties are just empty because they're not fit to live in.
Yeah. Because there's two things. Like if you want a proof of that, you just go and look at any of the high-rise housing commission buildings, right? You can see for most of them where they've been upgraded. You can see the new windows, and most of them will go up to a certain height, and then certain windows don't. You can see the difference where they have been sort of fixed up. But and that's a pure like. Anytime anyone talks about like privatizing competition, and the logical conclusion of neoliberalism is that they all talk about, getting things more efficient, right? Because they'll never, ever want to have the discussion about effectiveness. Because ultimately, when you privatize, there's only one end line, and that's profit.
Yeah.
And they'll use the term under, productivity and efficiency, but they won't ever use the definition of effectiveness. And that is what outcome you're getting. Because there's different ways you measure effectiveness, and that's always too hard to do. And it's far easier for whoever corrupt government officials that sold it off, right, under the terms of efficiency and productivity, because that's the biggest myth that everyone's drank the Kool-Aid for. And these are the outcomes you get now. We're living in these societies where we're heading, fast down that finish line of serfdom for most people.
You see the incentives. Yeah, the incentives are totally misaligned.
It's
yeah.
profit.
Yeah.
And there's a great comment I saw actually the other day, and this was to do with climate change, but it's sort of broadly applicable. Having to, employ teams to repair things creates jobs, but it doesn't create productivity. Because
Same as Drew, have you seen those charts? What is it like after a natural disaster? The cleanup bill and everything. Natural disasters increase GDP. So I guess.
Well, you look at the Marshall Plan after World War II.
They're rebuilding Europe.
Yeah. So it's effectively the same thing. Like it's man-made disaster. It does.
Yeah, you create activity, but at the end of the day, you haven't actually gotten any further than you were because all you've done is repair what was damaged.
Well, actually, another side effect of war is you get to rewrite history. I saw, Drew, have you seen that chart? It's asking people around Europe or wherever, which country do you think did the most to win World War II? And the sort of top three choices are USSR, Britain, the USA. You ask anyone in the modern day, oh, USA saved the day. Versus in 1945, these people were saying the USSR did the most.
Yeah.
And indeed, you look at the graphs, you look at the figures of like how many losses were incurred by the USSR. It's like 2/3 of the European losses.
Even if the USA hadn't come in, the USSR a year and a half, 2 years later would have won the war anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Possibly not even a year later. And
I know.
right from the outset, you can look at the writings from Hitler and his generals. They're always concerned about the USSR.
The soldiers that Germany and Nazis had put towards the West compared to what they were throwing to the East is, I'm not saying immaterial, but again, that's where most of the war had to be fought.
Yeah, you see as well, like not just the USSR losses, but if you look at the German losses on that front with the USSR, and indeed, that's where they had.
That's where the war was fought.
Yeah. But then, interestingly, you see.
But Clint Eastwood and the Battle of the Bulge and the rest of the movies were made in Hollywood.
Oh, it makes sense. Yeah, it's because as well, you see now with the USSR essentially. Well, I guess the US is definitely one of the winners of World War II. Let's put it that way. And now you see
was the winner.
Oh well, I mean, we could also argue that the USSR was the winner because their regime continued when that certainly wasn't obvious beforehand. But anyway.
Well, I'll say the USA has, and the empire of the USA has been the winner, definitely.
Well, a winner, sure. Let's anyway. My point is, you look at Japan and Germany now; they've totally internalized it. They've been, cut by USA. In Germany and Japan now, they have this guilt. They feel that their culture just used to start wars with everyone, and
I don't know if that's true for Japan.
Oh, they're getting over it a bit now.
They don't teach half their history.
Ah, okay. Well, I remember going, this would have been 2004 or so. I was in Japan. I went to the Hiroshima Museum, remembering that, getting blown up sort of thing. And then there was a thing there. Sorry, there's a nicer way of putting that. Anyway, but there was something commemorating, the start of World War II, and it said like when America started the war in the Pacific. And I thought, like, hang on, what? How did I'd heard of Pearl Harbor and the bombings and everything, but Japan was somewhat right. It's only years later I learned about how the US had imposed all these sanctions, that Japan couldn't get enough oil, and so the sanctions are essentially an act of war. If the US wanted to cut off Japan's oil supply, what did they think was going to happen? For anyone who says Pearl Harbor was this big surprise, no, you could predict for months it was going to happen. And even like on the day itself, they got, this alert from signals intelligence. They got a message, they didn't read it in time, but they got a message like 3 hours before or so saying like, this is happening, it's on. So yeah, like this notion that Pearl Harbor was a surprise. Yeah. But,
we digress.
Yeah, sorry.
We do.
Track. Drew, what do you think about being allies with the US militarily?
It's a complicated area. I think the reality is that we are going to drift further and further from the US because it's simply not in the US's interest to spend as much money as it does on having military bases all over the world. There are vested interests in the US in different corners of the military-industrial complex that will continue to profit off of having military bases in various places, and I think that means that it will be a slow withdrawal. But ultimately, like the US is not in a position to be strategically dominant over this region of the world, with both China and India rising to ascendance. It's like at the moment, obviously, the US is still a superpower. There's nothing, no surprises there. But at the end of the day, it has 1/10 of the population of the two major powers in our area. Short of a radical reversal of growth trends and GDP and everything else like that, eventually there's going to be no contest, right? Eventually, the US is going to have to learn how to live diplomatically with the other major powers in this area, because it's not going to be able to exert the sort of influence that it has in the past. In fact, it arguably doesn't have the ability to exert that influence now. But there's a very long tail on any sort of empire withdrawal.
But surely, to Owen's question about us maintaining our allegiance to America, if we can still plead with them to accept our 400 billion that we're offering for the submarines and take their nuclear waste, that would want to still be our ally, major ally.
There's being an ally and there's being a useful ally. I think
we are. I think we're asking, can we be their Iggy Pop, Three Stooges, their Stooges? Can I be your dog? Definitely.
Look, I don't know what conversations have gone on in the back rooms of the Parliament. There's one of the hard political realities here is that nuclear-powered propulsion technology for submarines is a closely guarded secret. There are not that many countries in the world that have it, and even fewer of them that have developed it independently. Mostly, they've got it through very, very strict sharing arrangements. The main ones that developed it on their own are France, India, and the USA. Right? This is a technology that is difficult. It requires a high level of skill to develop and maintain and understand, and you've got a whole supply chain process that has to be built into it, and that is expertise that, quite frankly, most of the world doesn't have, and most of the world is unwilling to share. And we are an island nation at the far end of the world. A small number of submarines in the past has already served us incredibly well from a defensive and strategic influence standpoint. And those submarines are now very, very old and in need of replacement, and have been in need of replacement for 20 years. The reality is we're not going to get these submarines probably soon enough for them to be the sort of trump card that I think some of our politicians think they are. But
nice one.
Yeah. But the fact is that actually gaining access to that technology and developing that expertise is a incredible strength to have in our pocket, which we and most of the world do not currently have. Even if we did not expect the US to be a useful ally 5-10 years from now, and look, I have many criticisms of AUKUS, but there is an argument to be had that it's worth extracting the benefit from that relationship now with this technology before things start to trend away from being a positive relationship or a useful relationship.
Yeah. I wonder actually, Drew, I've said previously on the podcast that Australia should think more about being a good global citizen, and that we can see that as a form of defense. That, if we were to, if we were more proactive about endorsing Palestine as like a separate state, for instance, doing more about the genocide in Gaza, doing more about climate action, if Australia could take the moral high ground, then we could have more influence over world affairs and, essentially get our way in versus an alternative is like, you have to do what we say because we've got big guns and things. And plus the alternative is if we're able to take the moral high ground, be a good global citizen, then what if we do get invaded? People like us, they're more willing to defend us. I mean, remember, when Ukraine got invaded, the argument, I was living in the US at the time, the argument was they're a democracy like us, and they're vaguely kind of part of Europe, therefore we should defend them.
And they're white.
That probably would have influenced some people as well, yeah. I didn't hear that said out loud.
No, but yeah, it's implied.
Yeah, thought me. But Drew, wouldn't you agree that, like, I guess who would be most liked in the world, and like, would that be enough to save them? I mean,
who would be the most liked?
Sweden would be up there.
Sweden, I think.
Yeah.
Sweden got right. No,
I mean, they're probably not too far off. I think there's an important distinction, though. I think there's an important distinction to be made when it kind of comes to foreign policy about the moral high ground and a good global citizen. The moral high ground is something that you can use domestically, but it's not always effective on the international stage, because the reality is that foreign policy and domestic policy are very different fields. It's a very common thing for people to look at how a country engages with other nations in the world and be like, well, that's hypocritical because you're supporting this at home, but then you're not complaining about this, horrible situation over there. But that's really not how things work. If you want to, for example, influence, say, Indonesia, as an example, on the issues of its treatment of the natives in West Papua, or on its religious discrimination, or on any of these things, you can't do that by prognosticating at it from a distance, right? It doesn't have to listen to you. It's a sovereign nation. They have no reason to care what you say unless you actually are engaging with them on a very tangible level. And so being a good global citizen is not necessarily about taking the moral high ground, at least not in terms of what you say in the international sphere. It means you actually sometimes have to trade or negotiate or develop agreements with countries who are doing things you don't necessarily like, because sometimes you need cross-community, cross-cultural connection, and you need to have some sort of leverage or something of value in the relationship to trade against, to ask them to maybe consider being better on one point or another.
New Zealand circa 2018.
Oh, the most liked country, maybe.
Yeah,
They'd be
about
contender.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
They've probably gone off the boil a little bit now.
Oh, I guess remember how they banned nuclear subs from stopping?
Yeah, I reckon it's about 5 years ago. If they were invaded by someone, the world would have had an outcry.
Yeah.
Not so much now.
What comes to
Their
mind?
economy's gone a bit sour.
Oh, okay,
They've had the natives protesting a little bit more because they tried to change some rules.
Oh, that's a regular
the
thing.
popular, prime minister's sort of gone now. She had a bit of a
Jacinda Ardern, yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff. A lot of Americans were leaving to migrate there because it was like, if the world blows up, I want to go and live there because I have money. It's a new gentrified place to go.
I heard they hated that, by the way.
That's what I'm saying there. So it was the crest of post Lord of the Rings sort of thing.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff
came out,
there was a lot of stuff going for us. So I think if, let's say, Tonga invaded New Zealand, the world would have been outraged.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely agree. Yeah. But actually,
so I think New Zealand 5 years ago could have called out Indonesia and said, "Clean up your act."
The thing is, it wouldn't have worked. That's the point I'm getting at. Calling it out doesn't do anything. And New Zealand actually has a fantastic history of being an effective global citizen, more so than us, and we did for a while. So, for example, we were for a long time one of the only countries that maintained a diplomatic embassy with Iran, right? And obviously, obviously there were many issues with Iran, right? And lots of countries didn't. But it meant that when someone actually had to sit down and engage diplomatically with Iran, how did they get the door open to have a discussion? Well, they had to come through us, right? So we enabled serious diplomatic discussions to occur, which actually for a while substantially improves things with Iran. So Iran previously was signed up to a nuclear non-proliferation thing where basically they had International Atomic Agency inspectors come through and check on things every so often to make sure that they weren't stockpiling resources or whatever. And we had a significant role in setting that up because we had that door that we kept open with them. And so we were an effective global citizen at that point in time. Now that's gone the other way because Trump. Let's not get into the details
now
of that.
Now they're targeting restaurants in,
that's right.
in Melbourne. They went and spray painted some stuff. Like that's how far they've put us on the backburn list.
Yeah, I don't know. So foreign listeners might not remember. Yeah, so there were a whole bunch of let's call them, like anti-Jewish attacks, especially around Melbourne.
Because Iran's, internal intelligence got focused on, Elstonwick restaurant.
Well, yeah. So it was. Foreign listeners might not have heard that ASIO, our spy agency, came out and said that it's been revealed Iran was behind all these anti-Semitic attacks.
Or did they say we caught someone and they just ran?
Well, but so what made me suspicious about this was, I mean, number one, no details are released. ASIO is not going to say how it was revealed that it's Iran. But so one of the incidents, for instance, a guy set fire to a synagogue and like the front door caught fire and that was it essentially. And I think this is a nation state. They have they have secret armies embedded in Lebanon. And then when they decide to attack Australia,
not just in Melbourne.
Well, yeah, like when they decide to attack Melbourne, all they can pull off is setting fire to a door.
Yeah, but you don't want to make it look too good. That's the thing. Like that's how. You and I can't think at that level.
It felt a bit silly, sorry.
No. You have to sort of play it down so it looks like incompetence.
I don't know. Drew, were you convinced by this? Did you believe ASIO that it was Iran behind this?
Inclusive or an exclusive?
Well, I mean, that becomes a difficult connection to draw. I think there's a lot of very complicated discussions and decisions occurring behind the scenes at the moment, because the Five Eyes has fallen apart because the US can't participate in it anymore because none of them can trust the US to actually keep secret information, and that's
all the leaks.
Yeah,
okay.
Right. And historically, Australia had been a very effective global citizen and hasn't been the last few years. We've taken some interesting decisions. But we also have this sort of strained on and again, off again, on again relationship with the USA at the moment, where we basically keep bribing the USA into being nice to us, but we're actually increasingly less useful to them. And I think
a toxic partner, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit. And I think some of that is the more useful we are to the US, the more they care about our internal politics, the more they care about how we run our intelligence agencies, how we run our show. The less
Gough Whitlam syndrome again.
Yeah, well, the less useful we are to them, the less they care, right? Because if we're not very useful to them, what does it matter? So I think there's possibly some political decision making occurring when it comes to ASIO and things like that, where sometimes you don't want to look too useful.
I don't. How does that relate to this burning down the doors thing?
Well, as he said, if you're too useful, they may start sort of getting more involved, and then you may lose off with their heads. So
maybe the attack has nothing to do with Iran, but
get smart rather than smart.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But actually thinking about Australia being a bad or good global citizen, I guess the worst that comes to mind for me was remember, so shortly after East Timor gained independence, there was an oil field that is in the overlapping region of our waters and East Timor's waters. I mean, who's to say maybe that's why we helped them get independence. But when Australian oil companies were negotiating with East Timor's government, how much of a cut are they going to get for these shared oil fields?
Did they put microphones in? Yes.
The Australian spies put microphones in East Timor government offices to, listen to what they were going to do about the negotiations. This would have been 20 years ago, maybe. Yeah. So I think that for me is, I think, the worst. Australia's worst moral.
It's not the worst, but it's
the stolen children. If we think back further, the stolen children are also up there. Yeah.
It's certainly the worst in recent years, put it that way. Not least because I believe we disappeared a whistleblower in that process as well.
The worst the US has done. I guess what day is it today?
What's the worst thing they've done this month? Yes.
Anyway, no, we have a few American viewers. We love all our viewers. Blame you guys for all the problems in the US. But anyway,
we regularly vilify our own. Barnaby yet?
Oh, he hasn't come up yet. Oh, he's what was it? He was involved. Was he involved in the detention center thing? Nauru? I know Peter Dutton was.
That's Dutton. Yeah, and his whole bribery and his company.
Well, there was a thing with
speaking of blemishes on our good global citizen thing, because Nauru is effectively a client state of Australia.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, they were already a basket case before that deal. They viewers might not be aware.
Well,
but,
Albanese's done a nice deal with them at the moment.
oh, they messed up themselves. So viewers might not be aware. Back in the
victim blame.
hang on, you guys, I'll tell you the story. So Nauru used to have the highest GDP per capita in the world. They discovered, I think it was phosphate there.
Well, they
so
discovered it. They were living on it.
whatever, they didn't notice it. I don't know. So they decided to mine the phosphate that
Right,
they were living on. And so, they got a good amount of money for their phosphate, but, it's a small island.
Yeah.
Eventually they dug up all the phosphate.
Yeah.
At one point, they were buying like Lamborghinis and stuff and living the high life, new sorts of food. I heard stories of like people would get a Ferrari imported and they were too big to fit in the car. And they're driving around a tiny island anyway. And then, sure enough, they squandered their money. And now, modern people think of Nauru as this like poor place that's dependent on the Australian government paying them to host, potential refugees to Australia. They used to be the highest GDP in the world. So, it's not Australia's fault that they ruined their island.
No, it's not.
We love people with sound bites, because you can encapsulate a whole history of even colonialism with 2 sound bites on this program.
Challenge me in the comments. This is an accurate history as far as I'm concerned. When I was reading this story,
Sounds like a lot of bird shit to me.
When I was reading this history, Drew, aren't you worried? This could be Australia in this story.
It is.
And-
We're giving
yeah.
away resources.
Exactly. So we need to make sure that we don't repeat from
We don't
Nauru's
do
mistakes. Yeah, exactly. It's some urgency. Yeah. We have a few more resources than Nauru, but like same things playing out here.
No, but our government is going to buy back some of the free gas we're giving away to make sure it's with our tax money.
That's already happening, isn't
Yes,
it? Aren't we
it
buying
is.
it back from Japan? Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, outrageous.
Yeah.
One of the many things we're going to change in the fusion party, yeah. But actually, Drew, thinking about recent policies, so there was the supermarket price gouging policy. You're part of that. Do you want to? We briefly covered. I think we told viewers about the blockchain part of it. Although, if any viewers remember that part, so Drew was working on some tax changes to help avoid monopolies. Do you want to tell viewers about this?
Yes. So the basic premise of that was the main premise of that was the market share thing. So at the moment, if you've got a company that buys another company and then buys another company, and it gets to be a large enough portion of the market, then the ACCC has to get involved. There's a whole investigation. It costs oodles and oodles and oodles of money. Courts are involved. And then at some point, they either decide or don't decide whether or not that company needs to divest some portion of its assets and its base to someone else so that there's, able to maintain a level of competition. And it's a whole process. It's incredibly complicated. It involves months and years and shitloads of money spent by both sides, the government and the company. It's a whole mess, essentially. And look, it's better than not having any anti-competition regulations, but it's a very expensive and inefficient way to ensure that we have a competitive marketplace. And so one of the premises here was to essentially introduce a market share tax. So you would have, rather than the ACCC breaking up all of these companies through this incredibly involved process, use their expertise that they've been working on in all of these processes to identify how many players is a reasonable necessity for a given market space to be competitive, right? And so if, for example, they're like, you need to have at least 7 effective players in a marketplace, then if you divide 100 by 7, you'll get like 13% or something like that. And you'll be like, okay, so that's your competitive market share. And so then if a company has more than the competitive market share in that space, then they pay additional tax based on how much over that market share they are. That encourages a company to divest lesser performing assets, which creates spaces for competitors to enter the market. And then when a company is at or near that share, right, they still want to make profit. Right? Companies all want to make profit. They'll have shareholders. That's the whole point. The whole point of doing business is to make profit. So if you can't make profit by expanding to new locations and increasing your market share because your tax burden goes up at the same time, then how do you do it? Well, then you have to invest in improving your processes. You have to invest in making the way you do business better or more efficient or more effective to get more profit out of the same amount of business. And that's a natural incentive then for innovation.
So there's only one thing wrong with that, and that's that. So I don't disagree with the principle of what you're saying, but it's still based on the fact that it's going to rely on, say, the ACCC. We'll use them as the governing arbitrator to be in charge, right? Because my view is that you're still going to get the same outcome as what we've got now. Because right now we've also got monopolies and duopolies in a lot of instances throughout Australia. So they shouldn't be the arbitrators of how many players we need to have in the system, because they're taking us for a ride here, whether it's the banking system, the supermarkets.
Well, the difference in this case would be that the ACCC wouldn't be responsible for enforcement, right? So at the moment, the ACCC has...
But who determines how many players should be in the market? Because they're under their watch, for instance, they've allowed this to happen.
And look, the reality is someone has to. Is the ACCC the best option? Possibly not. But at the moment, they're the ones with the expertise.
Yeah, if I could just take my point to its logical conclusion. So let's say all the current players, take ACCC out of it. So I'm the big four banks, I'm Deloitte's and, KPMG, those big four, which, they're global, obviously, Coles, Woolworths. They say, we're signing up to this. This makes total sense because currently the system works well.
Oh, yeah, for those players, yeah.
We're not cutting our nose here. Yeah. We're in this. We're 100% in this because we're doing the right thing. Because we've got other players in the system. Look at Aldi. We've got this. We've got Bank of Bendigo. This is working really well, and the market takes care of itself too. But someone needs to actually be not just an arbitrator, but an enforcer. So who will be the enforcer?
Well, that's just had a mental blank on our tax. The ATO. The ATO. Oh, right. Ultimately, if one person, if the ACCC is working out what the effective market share is, right, then once that is determined, it's a tax problem. It's not their problem.
No. You've missed my point. Who's making the arbitration enforcement about how many players should be in the system?
And what the rate's going to be, yeah.
Because the players who have skin in the game, like the bankers and the Woolworths, Coles, they've signed up. They said, yeah, we love it. We're in this. We're all signing up. But they've already, as we have discussed previously, those that are in there, that they want to maintain their power. So they're the inclusive ones already. They don't want to change it because they've got the power. So they want to keep the those out excluded.
Are we worried about corporate capture?
Yeah.
So yes, look, that's the thing. Like that comes down to corruption. That comes down to corporate influence over government. These things are always features of the system. That is ideally the point of living in a democracy. If we are upset with this corporate capture or with this corporate influence, we vote for different people. This is not perfect, but we have this mechanism that is built into our system at the moment to create pushback and to create governments that will actually resist corporate capture. Now, it's not perfect, but at the end of the day, you're not looking at a perfect solution. You're looking at a better solution. The ACCC may not come up with the perfect outcome.
Will to do it.
The ACCC may not come up with the perfect outcome for market share to start with. It might be affected by various influences and small amounts of corruption, and who knows, and it might only be, 4 people are okay in a market that already has 3 people, and so they all lose 2%. And you're like, well, that seems a bit, like it wasn't very effective. But even that, it's a step in the right direction. And ultimately, because at the moment the ACCC is both determination and enforcement. At least if you introduce this system, the ACCC is no longer enforcement. They are setting the criteria, but then the ATO is enforcement, because the ATO is the one that actually has to collect the taxes. And so anytime you introduce that separation of powers, you also reduce the potential for corruption. You reduce the potential for evasion, because you have 2 separate institutions, 2 separate functions of government that both have to be influenced if you want to get out scot-free. And so once again, it's one of these things that's not impossible, right? You're never going to get a perfect outcome, but you create more barriers to someone being able to exploit it. You create more avenues for someone to more easily improve things in the future, right? You're the first time around, you might introduce this system, and maybe all the corporate capture involved means that it barely affects the marketplace. But once the system is there, a government with a bit more political will in the future can encourage it to shift into slightly better positions over time. So
I'd like to think, yeah, I'd like to think based on, the conversation we had earlier on about, entrenched inclusiveness and entrenched exclusive consequences, which happens, and then they get sort of more, and we're seeing the outcome of how our cities are being developed. As I've mentioned before, you got tolls on the roads, people are forced to live who service people in the cities, teachers, nurses, etc., further out to travel in to do that. That's how they're building our cities now, by design. So these are things that are entrenched. The housing crisis, rents are going even above cost of buying and paying your mortgage now. So it's just absolutely insane. But that's our reality. So to put these, and I'll call it, with no disrespect, like nudging policies in with our government institutions to sort of get these corporations to become more effective in their outcomes, I don't think is the way we need to go. We have to actually do something drastically with political will to make these changes.
But this particular thing comes down to the underlying structural bias. So ultimately, you need political will at the top level to shift the situation one way or another quickly. But that political will can be facing an uphill or a downhill battle, right? So an underlying system has a structural bias. The incentive in that system may encourage things to trend towards more centralized, more extractive conditions, or it may encourage things to trend towards more decentralized, more inclusive situations. That structural bias is not everything, right? You can fight against structural bias, but a government that is fighting a downhill battle, so fighting in favor of the structural bias, will have an easier time. It still requires political will, right? You could introduce this system tomorrow, and the ACCC could set all the market share thresholds so they're the same as the situation is today, right? And with a lack of political will, nothing would happen. But you would have tilted the structural bias the other way. And so when you look at the long term of politics, political will can make significant changes when there are major upsets, but things will intrinsically trend towards their structural biases. At the moment, we have a structural bias that trends towards corporate capture and duopoly. We can shift that with a huge amount of political will, but unless we change the underlying system, we're expecting to still be there again 50 years from now, right? We not only need the political will to make sudden change, we also need to shift the underlying structural bias. And that's the point of this particular proposal, to shift that bias, even if nothing changes immediately because there's a lack of political will. You shift the bias, and in the long run, you make it easier for anyone who does have political will to move things in the positive direction.
Yeah, no, I do like that, Drew, about, many of our policies, they don't look like Band-Aids. We're addressing like long-term fixes for problems. Yeah. That's not to say that every fusion policy takes a while and voters have to be especially patient. Actually, thinking about how fusions policies compare with other parties, and, we were saying about political will before, unfortunately, not everybody agrees with the same sorts of topics that we do. Drew, how would you characterize the other minor parties? What makes us different?
I mean, there's a lot less of the other minor parties these days, so that's a lot easier than it used to be in the past.
I should mention not just
One Nation.
They're sort of they're reaching the threshold where they're not really minor anymore. But I'm thinking, I regularly receive emails from people with a manifesto, and it's parties that nobody would have ever heard of. Like, when it arrives in my inbox, that's the first time I've heard of these parties. And so there was, for instance, one of these smaller ones. a common demand they have is like Australia needs its own bank, like a public bank. Often they say it should be tied to the post office. There are, oh, what was it? I saw one, Drew, you probably know who I'm talking about. It says, we don't need any more royal commissions. We already know what to do. We already have the answers. And I was thinking, like, these people don't sound very aligned to fusion. But I guess, yeah, like it's, many people, when they start out wanting to have a new party, many people call them crazy. And unfortunately, like if you're going to submit your manifesto in all caps, then like you sort of play along with that.
So so my takeaway is that your manifesto's in lowercase.
Well, yeah, I think, I guess like less shouty at your potential fans. I think that's a good one. Although I guess, you need the passion to get started. Anyway, Drew, my question is more like, do you have any tips for these minor parties? Should they
give them a leg up?
Well, many of them end up joining Fusion.
Well, hence
And,
the name.
Well, yeah, and so like, what if they just join Fusion now? I mean, people listening to
Well,
this.
there was a previous guest who was
Yeah, Paul Ross.
Paul Ross. He was,
corporatism.
yeah, he was coveting to join your party.
Yeah, he wanted us to adopt his policies, which Drew, I told you at the time, but one of the things was to get rid of minimum wage. I said, I don't know that the rest of Fusion is going to agree with that, but that was major.
Was that the Libertarians? No, who was?
No, that was Paul Ross.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. The Libertarians also want to lower minimum wage or get rid of it completely. Yeah, Drew, for the record, getting rid of minimum wage.
Your views?
Look, if we transitioned to a universal basic income system, then after that, fucking get rid of minimum wage. I don't care, because after that, it doesn't matter.
Hold on. Yeah,
we fulfilled Paul's promise.
So, if we put the structural things in place to get rid of, to introduce universal salary by getting rid of minimum wage. So now you convinced me. So now we need to put these things in place before we get the universal wage. So is it the chicken or the egg now in this situation?
Universal basic income becomes a very complicated conversation. I'm not sure that getting rid of minimum wage before it is necessarily the trick for that.
It may convince the public. It may convince our libertarians and One Nations and whoever is against it.
It may. I do feel that in some of these situations, this being potentially one of them.
I'm being facetious here, by the way.
Yeah. There's a need to balance the potential human cost.
Yeah. The serfs may rebel.
That would be the revolutionary path if you want to accelerate things.
More into my way of politics.
Oh, I think you see in the US, many people vote against their best interest, and they aren't even aware.
They do.
They think it somehow was
the trump card.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you see, for instance, I guess this isn't really a voting mechanism, but they have lots of dialysis clinics for some sort of kidney problem, and you got to turn up like every few days. It takes hours there. You can get a kidney transplant. And they showed like all these people who they go to the clinics that have been bought out by private equity. If you go to a private equity clinic, you're less likely to go on the donor list. Like they convince these patients, oh, you shouldn't get a transplant. It's complicated and like you don't get to see us every day. I don't know what the exact arguments are, but the stats show like these people are less likely to sign up to get a kidney donation.
Well, just give them a jug of Mountain Dew.
Oh, does that help?
That's one of the weaknesses in our health system. Anything to do with organ transplantation is a weakness in our system.
Something as important as staying alive, and they can't even make that decision. They get influenced by all the misinformation. And but yeah, so voting, it's even easier to manipulate them. Yeah. So
as they say, you are not immune to propaganda.
Fusion has never tried propaganda, have we? I'm trying to struggle we've never been accused of it anyway, so that's a good start. Yeah.
I mean, all politics is some level of propaganda.
You have a manifesto.
Well, I have a personal.
But the Fusion Party has a manifesto.
We don't call it a manifesto.
We don't call it a manifesto.
Of course. Drew, on your site, you'd label anything propaganda? Manifesto.
Well, that depends on how you define propaganda.
Just isn't it your branding? Isn't it your
Well,
your
either way,
advertising?
I want to get rid of this this whole notion that a manifesto is bad. I
Last
think
podcast, we're talking about bringing back the Hitler mustache, right?
oh
It's
that's
like
right.
it's time to rejuvenate sort of stuff. So it's just about branding. So
Yes.
maybe you should start calling it manifesto.
Well, I should say I think it's when we talked before about what small parties should do. I absolutely encourage them to write a manifesto, and even call it a manifesto.
That's what I was
It's,
saying.
yeah, like I think there's too much stigma at the moment,
100%.
and so I was only joking before about like I don't think there should be any stigma if you can't formulate your political beliefs. If you need someone else to spoon feed you,
It could be like a battle to draft it, but it'll be your battle.
well, but yeah, you see, like plenty of people they sorry, it took me a moment. They ask you give them a policy suggestion. Should we have universal basic income? I don't know, like who said it?
And some people don't even know what they stand for, except for
Exactly, yeah.
smaller government.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh my God,
But
yes.
if you're going to ask who said this policy, was it my team? I think, basically these people don't deserve to vote. You should be able to specify like a few different, and not just like I like the climate, but specify what do you think should be done. And then I guess hopefully you would end up with a consistent set of ideas, cohesive set.
Yes, in the sense
and-
of having a manifesto as a cohesive view of the world that you are trying to align policy with, I do think that small parties should have that. I also think, and this is I think where most small parties started by people that write their own lengthy manifestos fall down, is that you then have to be able to create space for other people to get involved with and potentially expand or add nuance to that manifesto.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of small
Yeah, I guess
parties in
you don't
particular
want it to
fall
be-
down
yeah.
because they just
It's
have one
like
person.
almost like a fluid omni manifesto.
Yeah, exactly. Changing a bit. Although sometimes, having a cult of personality, it has worked. I mean, look at, I've heard that Pauline Hanson's party, One Nation, I've heard that runs a bit of a cult of personality.
It does.
I
And
think
do you know
the-
how
I
many
think the
state
leadership-
branches it has?
yeah.
It has, and
Well-
it has effectively no branch infrastructure.
No, and the leadership is going to change very soon. 100%.
Yeah, well, yeah.
They're going to be they're going to push him as the new Farage-esque with Barnaby, and the Murdoch press is going to start pushing him because they need a new champion.
Oh, they need someone to fill up the news cycle.
Yeah,
that's
because
for
they
sure,
lost credibility with the last election, so
Yeah.
they now need their own face, and he's
Yeah.
going to fit it.
He can dial in and chat with them any time of night, no
Oh, yeah.
matter where he
Right.
happens to be lying.
Drunk, lying.
But yeah, the cult of personality might get you some attention for a while, and it might have its advantages. But like the shooters, fishers, whatever party they are, they have more party infrastructure than One Nation does. Right? They're a fraction of One Nation's capacity, size or influence, but they have more party infrastructure. They have more functional party mechanisms than One Nation does, which is embarrassing for One Nation. And it's because they've allowed that cult of personality to be what the party is.
Well, the party needs a brand, though. I mean, if you compare them with like the Democrats, for instance, the Democrats probably, they would have a decent amount of infrastructure. But you ask anyone about the Democrats now, they
still exist.
Well, yeah, that would be what I was going to say.
Believe it or not, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the Democrats shot themselves in the foot several times aggressively and then lost an election. So, they're probably a special case in this circumstance.
But even, shooters, fishers, farmers, I couldn't name one person that they have.
Maybe they're pretty more careful and don't shoot themselves in the foot.
You would hope so. They probably don't.
That'll be bad branding.
Yeah, that'd be an absolute own goal. Yeah, but actually, Drew, we've been talking briefly. Fusion hasn't got an official like gun policy yet. I'm planning on working on it, but
timely.
Well, exactly, yeah. So I was floating the idea past some non-political friends. I personally would advocate for shooting should no longer be a hobby. Like shooting at targets.
You want to catch an animal, go and catch it.
Well,
seriously.
no, hunting is necessary.
Caveats here.
Well, no, but hang on. Hunting is necessary, and obviously people need to practice hunting by shooting at
and
targets.
farmers.
Yeah, exactly. But
and law enforcers.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
But like,
so back to where we are.
No. Hang on. I'm saying like as an Olympic sport, as a game, just shooting at targets as the end goal. I think that's, I mean, sorry, some people will miss out, but I don't think it's worth it. Like the risk reward just isn't there for us.
And equestrian.
Yeah, well,
No one really watches.
well, already, the Animal Justice Party, they want to get rid of all animal entertainment, and so I'm very.
So, what is your policy on guns?
Well, so we haven't formulated
I have
this
one.
yet, but Drew and I will be working on it. But yeah, so I'm saying number one, non-citizens should absolutely not have a gun, unless
Is it racist?
call it racist, sure. But
Look, it doesn't have to be racist. There are plenty of British people here that are also not citizens and wouldn't have a gun if that was the case.
It's the British people too.
Well, I was going to mention that there is a caveat. My understanding is New Zealanders can join the Australian military, so I guess they would have physical possession of a gun, but I don't know. Like they're not allowed to purchase private weapons, are they? Military personnel.
New Zealand has a lot of special cases in Australian law.
You do know it was in Australia that committed the atrocity in New Zealand.
Yes.
So I'm just flipping.
Was that with the gun?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just flipping your no foreigners allowed to have guns here when we just committed the big one in New Zealand.
Well, but I'm saying only citizens should be able to have guns because they have loyalty. Well, think about it. The Australian, he shot people in New Zealand. He didn't shoot fellow Australians. Got you there. Anyway, but it's not worth the risk reward. Like you really need to trust someone to have a gun, and if they have such little loyalty that anyway. Another one is as I said, so shooting for hunting or practicing military things, that's, I think, we need those people to still have guns.
Which ones were they?
People training to be hunters or military people or cops. Yeah.
So do people practice to be hunters?
Well, of course you have to. How else?
But in our society, do you really need hunters?
What do you mean? That's the main.
It's a sport, right?
No, I'm saying like a farmer.
Oh, you said farmers.
No, I'm calling anyone a hunter if they shoot a gun at an animal.
Well, that's not really how we kind of harvest animals these days.
Well, no,
commercially.
It could be because it's a test. Well, what do you want to call these people? Drew, you know who I'm talking about. People who.
Oh, okay, those people. Commercial. No, I thought you meant like sports hunters. They go out and shoot ducks at hunting season. On the FUD style.
Oh yeah, shooting animals for fun. I guess I would get rid of that.
Okay, let's be specific.
Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, sorry.
Don't even
shooting
know.
Animals.
Do we have that?
Yes.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
Oh, okay.
The duck that exists. Yeah. So I'd get rid of that.
That's probably reasonable.
Or shooting is an Olympic sport, but I would propose getting rid of it. No longer a sport, because already think about the the bullfighting in Spain. Many people, including myself, regard it as barbaric. I would get rid of that. So anyway,
Fishing.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, there must be more humane. There must be more humane.
Throw dynamite in the water.
Well, you see,
knock them out first.
The current approach. I don't know if viewers are aware how much bycatch they call it. So they're hunting for salmon or whatever. They have all the lines dragging along behind the ship. They pick up dolphins, starfish, just anything. Often they're scraping the bottom of the sea. A huge amount of animals get killed that they weren't planning on catching, and they completely go to waste.
What about deforestation for like big farms?
Well, the palm oil.
Yeah.
So palm oil is in 50% of prepackaged foods in the supermarket. Not just food.
We've become vegan.
Well, this is, I guess it is tricky to go fully vegan, but yeah, Drew, you've heard, palm oil, it's everywhere in the supermarket. They cut down the
orangutans.
They get rid of the orangutan habitat to make room for palm plantations to grow the palm oil. Yeah,
so we've gone from guns to now being full on vegan.
Well, I hope viewers enjoy us shedding light on the world's problems.
I told you I don't recycle anymore. Yeah.
Tisk. Okay.
What's that?
Well, I frown upon you for
why?
No.
I told you it's a petrochemical.
Okay. Anyway,
they should pick up the bill.
Viewers, if you've heard of the Animal Justice Party, by the way, they share many of these same ideas that I'm currently talking about. But I guess the main difference with the Animal Justice Party is they are against killing animals ever versus, I think
ever.
Yeah. So there was a question that came up. For instance, Cami, one of our senators, was asked, what would you do about the feral deer population?
Oh, they part of the Fusion Party.
Cami was our candidate for Victoria. Yeah.
Okay.
But then, so the Animal Justice Party was there. They were saying, round up all the deer, the feral deer, and put them in some sort of orphanage.
Christmas kind of.
Well, maybe that could do, but there are thousands of deer, and it's off. It's mountainous. It's like it's really tricky. This idea that we're going to round up thousands of deer. There was a case in the US actually. There were wild horses. This is very similar. And so the government, they wanted to be humane. They weren't going to kill the horses. They rounded up all these wild horses, and they were giving people $1,000 if they adopted one of the horses. The horses just needed to stay alive for a year to prove that you were a proper, or
and what
foster parent,
you could take a photo of them in a year.
I think maybe the inspectors came around and visited, whatever. But either way, so that wasn't the problem.
Okay.
But these people were terrible carers for the horses, and the department knew it. And then, once the year was up, oh, my horse got sick and died. Can I have another one? Okay. And so, but this still worked out. What was it? They
Efficient but not effective.
Well, no, it was like the government department. It solved a problem for them because like the cost of them keeping the horse.
What outcome you wanted? Yeah.
Well, yeah. If they had kept the horse alive and then eventually euthanized it, more humanely, so they were giving these people $1,000. Their own cost to keep the horse and euthanize it, more correctly would have cost more than the $1,000. So they knew that the horses were being mistreated, but thought like, oh, well, we have to balance our books.
Like many of the ways and solutions of how they dealt with Indigenous people as well.
I mean, I can agree with you that they mistreated Indigenous people.
Until they gave them casino licenses, I guess.
Oh, in the US, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't quite see the connection, but I agree that they mistreated them, man.
As Milton would say, show us the incentive and we'll show you the outcome. If you're going to pay people to take horses, but you're not going to pay them to look after horses, they're going to take horses.
More of the behavior you reward, always.
But actually, so speaking, so even though fusion, I don't want it to sound as though we're for like let's go kill some animals.
No, because you got no guns.
That's a good point. But one of the other points I wanted to make. So Drew, many people might not be familiar with our support for alternative meats.
Yep.
How do you make them?
Well, that's there's a whole thing to do with like collagen frameworks and growing cells in vats on collagen frameworks so that they form muscle-like structures and things like that.
Whatever protein you want.
Like
whatever
an ear?
protein you want.
Is it protein?
Oh no, but you can get it like in the shape of an ear, and you just.
Oh, I could. Yeah, you could. I reckon you could. I mean, it must be scientifically possible. Yeah.
You could. Yeah, I'm not sure that would turn out particularly tasty, but. Yes.
But either way, so our friends at We Planet, for instance, they're very big on promoting, synthetic meat is what it's often called.
Yeah.
I think they need to brand it differently.
Well, it's better than lab-grown meat, don't you reckon?
Still, I don't want to eat synthetic meat. Like,
well, it was created from us, not from God.
Well, like,
what's a good name, do you reckon?
Look, I
think synthetic meat's fine. Oh, alternate meat? I don't know.
call it.
There was
call it new meat.
Yeah, so We Planet actually.
we have maybe secular meat.
Yeah.
Nah, just use one of those silly brandings. Call it new, but with just like NU.
Secular meat with a dipping sauce of eternal dipping sauce.
Yeah. But then, why do they limit them? They limit themselves still to recreating existing ones. And you see, same as many of the vegan restaurants, they say, quote unquote chicken, quote unquote pork.
Because like it's like you should meet someone that you like, right? Like you're on the dating apps, aren't you?
I'm scared about how much you're going to say.
Oh, no, I won't. I promise I won't. But you're on the dating apps.
Okay.
The first, I guess, association you have with a potential intimate partner is what? Yes, visual.
Yeah.
So like your food, like you're going to eat a piece of chicken and the way it is on the plate, because you start.
Yeah, but I don't say like, oh, sorry.
You start salivating just because of the visuals, the way it looks, right?
Sure.
It is very visual, the food, right? So again, if I'm a vegan and I see something on the plate that looks something that I'm familiar with, and I could have been an ex-carnivore or whatever, but I like it. So before I even eat it, I've already started to digest in my mouth. My mouth's ready to eat it. That's why it looks like chicken. So that's the answer.
Yeah, I get that point. Yeah, I guess so. To your dating app example,
like it could be like Roy Shabazz. What's that guy's name? Potentially a dating app. He may look like someone.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah,
but then when you meet them, you think, oh yeah,
there's
that connection because you've already formulated something in your mind. He looks like a nice piece of chicken fillet.
Yeah.
Or she, whatever.
Let's go with that. But yeah, I guess the other problem is humans lack the vocabulary to describe food very well. I mean, you see, many people still drink, I guess, cheap wine. You need to be able to describe the taste to yourself in order to fully
It's
notice what you see.
Yeah, it's a very cerebral component to it as well.
I mean, you can see many people, they can take a bite of something and ask, is this pork? Is this chicken? I don't know. And so if you're at that stage, I guess, what are they supposed to write on the vegan meat? Like there's no vocabulary to describe it. Yeah. Anyway,
I suggest the plethora of cookbooks, there are ways of describing food.
Okay.
But we'll move on.
Okay. Anyway.
So again, you're talking about synthetic meat, the cerebral meat. What do we call it? What do we land on?
Well, like I would call it like new meat or something. Though apparently that's also been taken by someone in the US for trademark.
Right. I see. Yeah. But yeah, Drew, have you ever got good responses chatting with the voters about this?
I'll be honest. Synthetic meat is not in my top 10 things that I actually talk about with people.
Just like I said to this guy, don't talk about nuclear power plants in Brunswick.
They didn't like it.
It's not.
These people are anti-science.
Yeah. And it's also a thing where if I get into talking about synthetic meats or alternative proteins and things like that, people go on the vegan thing, and then I get the whole "so are you vegan" thing, and I have a list of dietary requirements that I have to live with, which means I can't be vegan. And so it becomes a whole very complicated conversation. So synthetic meat is far, far down the list of things that I actually talk about with people.
Yeah.
Where does the nuclear topic come up on your list?
Probably about 6th or 7th.
You went early with that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And in Brunswick, I'll sit here know your audience.
I guess, okay, fair enough. The viewers might be suspicious of this was an episode of propaganda, but yeah, Peter's not a member of the Fusion Party, and
they haven't realised they
likes reminding people that he's not. Anyway, yeah. But yeah, Drew, I guess we can't talk all day. Was there I think where we covered most topics. I guess what can people look forward to in the Fusion Party next year? I mean, there's the Victorian election that's coming up.
Yep. Look, there's some stuff that I won't talk about just yet because it's still in the works.
We haven't decided. If loyal viewers might remember, I'm encouraging Peter to run in Victoria. I've been told by a few people that I should run in Victoria for this would be the upper house, the Northeast Metro. So I think there's 2 Labor people there, a Liberal, I think, Greens. Not sure who the other one is.
Who's the Labor person here?
I don't know their names. Okay. Sorry. Okay, anyway, sorry, Drew, you were saying it's a Victorian election, and what else did you say was happening?
We're working on some new campaign strategy stuff, and that may or may not filter into the Victorian election in some way. Depends sort of how many people we get that want to be involved and what their priorities are, because obviously we're all volunteer run. So you have to work with your candidates. You can't just dictate that this is the line that you have to use. People don't work like that. But those are sort of in the works. So that's excitement for a future time, perhaps.
Drafting the manifesto.
Yes. Oh, because we have our policies, yeah.
But you haven't branded it as a manifesto.
Well, yeah, something that something to follow up on. I guess, Drew, we got to follow up with Paul. It turns out if you're a fan of his ideas already,
who?
Paul Ross, the corporatism. Because okay. We'll see about the UBI thing. But anyway, listeners, keep in mind, we don't only have Fusion people on. If you have ideas for a guest, please email me, owen.miller@fusionparty.org.au. Anyway, Drew, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.